Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Breaking Muscle podcast, where we explore what health and fitness can and should look like at any age. I am Pete Hitzman, the managing editor at breakingmuscle.com, and your host for today's show. Of all the misconceptions that exist in Western society, perhaps the hardest to overcome is what aging can and should look like. This is especially true for women, who face a mountain of cultural nonsense when it comes to their bodies in general, and in particular once they reach age 40. Amanda Thebe has rejected those societal norms outright. A born skeptic and voracious learner, she has turned the breadth and depth of her experience into a formidable set of tools to reach post-menopausal women with physical and mental empowerment. Amanda sits down with me to give a frank account of how menopause affected her, and reveals that the turning point came when she started reaching out to others about their experiences. She details how she decided to take charge of her circumstances through social support, nutrition, and setting aside time for herself. Undeterred by the lack of information out there for women who want to become fitter after 40, she works tirelessly to change the mindset of women when it comes to strength and resistance training, fat loss after menopause, and what aging can and should look like. We cover the power of scoring that first win to unlock your potential for progress, how to find balance between getting the work done and listening when your body says stop, and her advice for women who are struggling with fitness with no athletic background to fall on. We're working hard to bring you the guests and topics you want to hear every week on the Breaking Muscle podcast, so if you like what you're hearing, do us a favor and head over to iTunes, Google Play Music, or Stitcher to leave us a rating and a review. And as always, if you have any feedback for the show, fire away at editorial@breakingmuscle.com. Joining us today on the Breaking Muscle podcast is our own Amanda Thebe. She is our over 40 women's health and fitness specialist, and she is a personal trainer currently residing in beautiful Houston, Texas. Thank you for sitting down with us this morning.
Hi, Pete. Excited to be here.
We're really excited to have you. So this is an interesting interview for me because it's on a topic I know almost nothing about. And I kind of pride myself in having dabbled in enough areas where I can have an intelligent conversation on most things. Menopause and women's health, I'm out of my depth. So I'm very glad to have you here as the resident expert for Breaking Muscle. And I want to know how you came to decide you wanted that as a specialty.
Yeah, I sort of fell into it, actually. It was one of those areas that I avoided and never really looked into myself until I started experiencing it. And like most people, you tend to become an expert in something that you've experienced or something that you're involved in. And so I've been involved in health and fitness for a long time as an actual passion and a secondary career for about 15 years. And for the last 5 years, it's been my primary career. And even when I would train my clients who were going through menopause, I was very dismissive of the whole area. I remember one client, I'm going to be guilty of admitting that one client came up to me and, said something along the lines of, I don't feel great today. This menopause is really kicking my ass. And I was like, you'll be fine. Get on with it type thing and soldier on. And really, I feel quite bad about that now because when menopause hit me, I was sidelined quite badly. And so I started digging around and finding experts in the field of hormonal disruption and over 40. I say over 40 very loosely because I believe it's between like 35 actually till you die. Till to death. 35 until death doesn't sound as good as over 40. So, and then I started digging around and finding out information and actually realizing there was nobody really talking on a platform about it. And so that's how I came about doing it.
You said your personal training was a secondary career for you.
Yeah.
What were you doing before?
Oh, it's really nerdy. I was a bit of a nerd. So I was a business analyst for IBM.
Okay. That is a bit of a transition.
Yeah, and what happened is I'd always done the fitness. I'd been the aerobics instructor, the spin instructor. I actually represented Schwinn in Germany at their big expos, and I am a black belt in karate. And then I would teach, the bar, it was called bar class, but it was the physical lifting of a barbell. Remember in the group setting? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think they still do that. Step, I don't know, you can name it, I've taught it. Then I did my personal training certification in the UK, which is actually a 2-year diploma. It's not like a weekend thing, it's regulated there. Mm-hmm. So that was good. I did that at Loughborough University, and that was just because I was passionate about fitness and health and wellness. When we moved to Boston to live, I couldn't work for IBM anymore. So I did more fitness, and I transitioned my IT into graphic design. So they were the things I was doing alongside. So that's sort of how I came to be where I am. And the reason I sort of let the graphic design go is because I got lonely, sat in the basement of my house at a computer all day long. I'm a people person.
I can definitely identify with that. It's kind of funny being in media. You spend a lot of time not with people, kind of by yourself with your work, holed up in the basement, as you say.
Yeah.
So you've surveyed the field then, as far as fitness goes. You've been there, tried it, got nerdy enough about it to not just to do it, but to train other people to do it then.
Yeah, and so I think that I go into fitness as a natural skeptic, but also as a willing learner, if that makes sense. And so I've definitely transitioned my way of learning through like following certain people and then unfollowing them when I didn't believe they were authentic enough. And I honestly believe now that I'm on the path of really following people that I think truly believe they are doing the best for people and will openly admit when things are changing and that they maybe have done things they wouldn't do now, in their past, looking back. And so actually the person that mentored me without even realizing was Coach Dos Remedios. I bought his book, Cardio Strength Training, I think it was about 8 or 10 years ago now, and then reached out to him and said, oh my God, you rock my world. This is like such an eye-opening way of training, this metabolic resistance training. And then he actually took the time to reach out to me and said, thank you. These are other great people who should be following. And then I started following Josh Henkin of the DVRT, and I'm now one of their master trainers. But so I've dabbled in lots of different areas of fitness and now feel like I really believe what I'm doing is the best way to train. But I'm always open to learning. And I think that the best coaches admit they don't know everything. And that's what I am.
And something that I'm finding the further I get into fitness as a coach and as an athlete is that the best coaches typically can answer a question from a variety of different angles, right? If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and that's a cliche that's sort of abused, but it's true in a lot of the typical path for coaches until somewhat recently has been very, very specialized. If you're going to be a weightlifting coach or a powerlifting coach or a cycling coach or a running coach, you studied that thing and you did that thing for a number of years, decades even. And so when somebody came to you with a question or a problem, you would recommend the path that you knew. Well, there's this new crop of coaches, you, me, and a lot of CrossFit coaches, honestly, who don't give enough credit for the breadth of their knowledge, who are learning a whole bunch of different things and a whole bunch of different ways to address the same problems. And I think that makes you as a coach a more valuable tool to your clients, because if you only know how to tell them to do one thing and that one thing does not resonate with them for whatever reason, maybe they have a physiological limitation or maybe they just hate it. Like if you're a kettlebell dude, I'm a kettlebell dude, and I try to show somebody kettlebells and they just don't like them, then it doesn't matter how good they are. The best tool is the one you'll use, right?
I agree, and I think that but one of the problems with that is I feel like simplifying all of that knowledge down to suit the client. That's probably the hardest part of it. But when I've moved to Houston and I'm not training in person at the moment, even though it potentially will happen soon. But I think it honestly comes down to client-specific work. Like each client needs something different. And I agree. I mean, my tool of choice is the ultimate sandbag because I personally have seen amazing results in as far as performance and rehabilitation, for the full spectrum and general fitness. but it isn't for everyone, and not everyone has access to them. That's usually the issue I have. But mobility, strength, performance, nutrition. I mean, we need to look at fitness from a holistic point of view. That's my point. That's where I come from. And now with all of the menopausal stuff, it's looking at things from a stress perspective, from a rest, from a restoration point of view. But we all should be looking at fitness in that regards. And touching on the CrossFit side of things, I believe that now most CrossFitters that I associate with have started looking at CrossFit thinking, this isn't the be all and end all anymore, and paleo isn't the only thing we should be looking at. And they've opened their minds, and now some of the best coaches that I follow have expanded their CrossFit knowledge into other areas. So I think that it's just, honestly, a good coach is someone that can expand their thinking.
A good human being, I guess, is someone who can expand their thinking.
Yeah,
and they might happen to be a good coach, right? So let's go down to brass tacks. So you have been an athlete for all of your life, probably, or at least most of your life, and you're raging along, doing your thing, crushing goals, and doing your athlete thing. And then, what was the realization that this is menopause and this is how it's affecting me? What was that sort of psychological realization like?
Well, it was psychological and physical. And so sit back, relax, put your feet up, because I've got a tale to tell. So I'm going to try and make a long story short, because, I can spin a yarn, I can talk and talk and talk, but basically, so I'm 47 now. I know I don't look it, and I know nobody can see me on this podcast, but honestly, I look like 23 now. So I'm 40 years old, and I'm entering my 40s, and I'm feeling pretty damn good. I'm the fittest I've been, and I feel like I've got so much energy, and I just can't wait to help people. That's basically where I am. And I've got a pretty regular routine established, and one of those things included boxing. I used to just go to a boxing class. It comes from the martial arts side of things. I just like hitting heavy shit, right? So I'm at the boxing class, and I come over feeling a little strange. I really can't describe it any better than that. I just feel odd. And I go home afterwards, and I have to take to my bed, and basically step forward 3 days later, I haven't got out of bed, and I think something's happened to me. I think I've got a virus or something, and I can't work out what happens, and then it passes. And so I just let that go. But then it happens again, and it happens again. And the symptoms that I'm experiencing are I can't feel one side of my body. I lose numbness in my face and my hands. I can't walk. I get it's like my equilibrium has gone. I have a vertigo attack, and my vision goes in one side of my body. And it lasts for about 3 or 4 days, and then I'm physically sick. I can't stop being sick, like motion sickness type symptoms. Mm-hmm. And then it comes and goes. And so this is a new thing that's happened to me. And then basically what happens is I can't keep up my regular routine. And so I'm impacted from that point of view. I'm like, what's going on? Why can't I get up and work out? And so bit by bit, I start having symptoms that don't make any sense to me. So I go to the doctor, and I go to specialists, and over a course of a year and a half, I start seeing neurologists, I start seeing ear, nose, throat doctors who actually induce vertigo into me with these electrodes all over my head to see how my brain is coping. I go to see vestibular rehabilitation specialists, like physiotherapists, that can sometimes correct a vertigo in you. Anyway, so it's only when I go to my gynecologist, I actually go for a regular routine, which most women over 40 have to do. And he says to me, oh my gosh, you don't look so good. Are you sure you're not suffering from migraines? And I also start crying, and he diagnoses that I have depression too. Because in between all of this, my like zest for life is gone, and my usual get up and go attitude has got up and gone. Like I literally am struggling to reach my potential every day, and I become withdrawn, And all of this is happening as my new fitness career is taken off. So I'm seeing clients and I'm bringing my A game, and I'm coming home and I'm just not doing anything. I can barely get off the couch. And so the realization hits me that something's gone wrong. He identifies that I'm suffering from migraines and depression, but this is all from, he gets blood tests done. There's a hormonal profile you can get done. So it was like a big moment of relief for me. I bawled my eyes out, which is something a Brit doesn't tend to do. You know, there's a war to be won. We have to just get, keep a stiff upper lip, so to speak. But it was a sense of relief for me, and it made me realize that, something was happening out of my control, and I'm a complete control freak. And so I had to sort of give into it. And it was then that I started digging around, and finding information. First of all, I went on to medication for my depression, and within a month or two, I could start to feel signs of normality coming back, because it was impacting my family and my husband. My kids were scared of me because I was freaking out, and they were sad for me because I wasn't being the mum I could be to them. And so I started coming back. My migraines, that was another thing I could manage to a point. I could find triggers. I could work out food triggers and emotional triggers, hormonal triggers. I suffer from migraines with an aura, which means they're an ocular migraine that affect my vision and my sense of equilibrium. I don't get headaches, and they do cause numbness down one side of my body, so I wasn't having a stroke like I thought I had. But anyway, so, this path of physical inability that happened to me made me then start talking about it with other people. I reached out to my clients and said, I have to tell you, I've not been myself, and it's because of these things. And it opened up the floodgates for them to start speaking to me. And so I think that then I realized, what? It feels good to talk about this. Other people want to talk about it, but they don't. And I think it's because as women, we tend to be fairly resilient, even though you don't think we are, because we nag and we moan and complain. But we are fairly resilient, and we tend to just get on with things, and maybe are a little bit silent in our own issues because we don't think anybody else is suffering, and we feel like we're the only ones going through this. The minute I started talking, though, and writing about it on Breaking Muscle and within my blog and on closed Facebook groups that specifically deal with this, women are like, oh, thank goodness, I'm not going crazy. There are other women out there that are going through menopause, going through menopause, and are also experiencing issues that make no sense to them. And so that's basically where it all came from.
It's sort of the dilemma of the tray full of donuts on the conference room table. Nobody wants to take the first one, but once somebody takes one, everybody's going to put a hand in.
That's great.
So you've had, okay, so I'm a 34-year-old dude, no experience with this at all other than distance observationally with the women in my life, but you use the term in your writing a lot, menopause hell, and that's not hyperbole. What you just described is an incredible ordeal, completely out of left field that you weren't expecting and no one told you to anticipate, especially not in that level of detail, right? You're describing symptoms of Bell's palsy, and you can't stand up. You physically cannot get yourself off the couch, not just because you're unmotivated, because your body won't work. That is hell. That's especially for somebody who's so used to operating at such a high level. That is excruciating. And then the psychological ramifications of that, struggling with depression. Well, yeah, you're struggling with depression. There's depressing stuff happening to your life. That seems a natural response. And
the depression was twofold, because it was a natural response to everything that was happening, all of the stresses and the hormonal fluctuations. My low estrogen can actually trigger depression. So I was also fighting something that I couldn't just talk my way out of. I also needed to understand that my body was in a biochemical war zone. Yeah. I don't even know how to describe it yet.
No, I think that's a very apt description. So what was it like when you finally had the realization and you started pulling yourself, I mean, do you pull yourself out of it? What are even the right words to use there?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way I spoke to my client 5 years ago when I said, pull yourself together, basically, get on with it, was really just me being ignorant to the fact that she couldn't. Mm. It's like telling somebody with depression, mental health issues, oh, you'll be fine, just
cheer up,
snap out of it. Yeah, why are you so miserable? Cheer up, yeah. And so what I had to do, and it's a work in process. I'm continually still doing this, right? It's not like I'm just okay now. I mean, I'm not. But what I did was, it was like almost like a 7-step process of how I had to look at things. So I took a step back, for one, and I looked at everything in my life and decided what was important and what wasn't. So I let all the fluff disappear, and I decided to just focus on the things that mattered to me, and that was the happiness of my family, the happiness and the health of myself, the success of my business, which I wanted to be successful, and my ability to just like get through every day. And if that meant that I had to let some things go in my life, then I did. Now, I didn't have to let any people go because I surrounded myself with supportive people. But if there were people in my life that didn't understand me, then for sure the saboteurs would have had to have gone. And I was quite brutal about that. I didn't want to suffer fools because I didn't have the energy. A few things I looked at were my nutrition. So I'm a PN certified coach, so I have a good understanding of nutrition. But when you're depressed and when you're feeling low, you want to grab that plate of donuts, right? You don't want to do some healthy stew that you've cooked from scratch, or some Mennonite bread that you've watched somebody start from the birth of their mother. And so I just realized that I was just not eating optimally because I just wasn't functioning properly. But it was like this hellish cycle that if I didn't eat well, I didn't feel well. And when I didn't feel well, I wanted to eat terrible food, and I knew that I had to, it was round and round. So I basically just took a step back and started planning my food a little bit better, without judgment, but knowing that I needed to eat better to feel better. And I had to make sure I had plenty of liquids. So I was drinking more water. Alcohol had to go completely for me because it was a trigger for my migraine. So that was just I love to get drunk, and in fact, it's a life goal. It's a life goal to get drunk and a little bit horny again, because it helps anyway. Yeah. So, and then in addition to that, I had to start managing my stress. I don't feel like I'm an outwardly stressed person. I'm volatile, so if I get angry, I shout and scream, and then I'm fine again. But I don't feel like I hold on to my stresses. But I clearly was, because as soon as I had a small stress, then I could feel my migraine starting, and my depression would worsen. And so all of these things just had to be managed, and without judgment as well. So one of the big things was, if I could feel myself being unwell, and it meant that I had to spend 3 hours on the sofa that day, then that's what I did. And I didn't care if that was the right or wrong thing to do. It's just what would work for me.
The way you're describing this, even though it sounds awful from my perspective, the way you're describing this, though, is an opportunity. Like, you came full circle from, spending an amount of time laying around feeling bad for yourself. Came full circle to, okay, what can I learn about myself from this experience? What can I change with my nutrition? What can I do to create more balance in my life? What can I do to improve my health? Things that probably would have been beneficial to you just as much 20 years ago, but now the challenge that you're facing creates a sort of focus that you never would have had otherwise.
And I think that also comes with maturity as well. I mean, I suppose menopause happens at a certain age from evolution, but as women, we're equipped to be able to cope with this situation, right? But what the problem with menopause for me was, I feel like as an education tool, we learn in school about puberty because we want our teens to be prepared when it happens, and there's now information in abundance on pregnancy. I mean, when I had my first kid 15 years ago, there wasn't a huge amount of information, but some of it was there. Now, because of places like Breaking Muscle and Girls Gone Strong, and we've got so much information about pre, during, and post-pregnancy that we really have just got no reason not to have all the answers. But when it came to menopause, it just got thrown at me, and I didn't have any information, and I'm knee-deep in the industry, and I couldn't find this information. And so that was the most frustrating thing for me about this. I feel as though if I'd had the information and could have bulletproofed myself or had an awareness about it, I wouldn't have felt so overwhelmed by everything. I mean, it's really difficult to say, you know, I would have, if I'd have known about it, then I would have coped with my depression or my migraines, because I probably would have felt the same way, but at least I would have identified why I was getting them. Right? Now, there are resources out there, but I honestly didn't find them easily. And even if, like, I felt as even if I could be a conduit for people to go to and say, Amanda, do you know anything about this? Can you direct me to the person that's an expert in this field? Because I profess to not know everything at all, but I am reaching out to the people that do. Mm-hmm. And as far as turning this into a positive experience, that's really, really difficult, but it's what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm looking at this from a number of perspectives, thinking, one, this is also a chance for reinvention, because things are changing dramatically in my body, and I'm having to take a big step back at my whole life. And so now I'm looking at things thinking, you know, what's my place in life? What's my role in life? And lots of women do, because things are dramatically changing as far as their children, their careers, their home lives. And so it's, to me, it's an opportunity for me to say, you know, what do I want from life now? I'm not going to fritter away my hours every day. I'm going to just like use the time I've got now to just do something really proactive. I'm going to feel the best I can feel, and I'm going to help people as much as possible. I'm going to give zero fucks as each day goes by, because quite seriously, I don't have time for that anymore. Like, it really has been quite an enlightening experience, as well as being a hard one.
Well, and I think the critical thing that is central to your mindset here is you have found a challenge and you're going to attack it. You're not going to just sit back and woe is me, and now you might have days like that, but the overall trend is I'm going to get after this thing and I'm going to conquer it and I'm going to become better because of it. And that is the thing that I think has changed really only in the last 10 or 15 years when it comes to women's health and fitness by and large, right? There was this culture of feminine fragility that was encouraged by the fitness industry, by the way. They didn't want your heart rate. I forget when it was. There was a paper that was put out, I think in the 30s, maybe, the 1930s, that talked about women should never get their heart rate over a certain amount, like 120 or 130 beats a minute, because they would die and all these things.
Death by exercise would really be quite terrible.
Well, you know, women weren't supposed to ride bicycles. I'm reading this wonderful book right now about the early history of the bicycle, and it was so frowned upon for women to go out in public in pants at all, but especially not going out in public to exercise. And that was, you know, like in the broad scheme of human history, that was not very long ago that we had this sort of bizarre culture where we thought women were this separate species that shouldn't pick things up and put them down. Now it's totally flipped, or it's starting to flip.
It's interesting because I often do like public speaking, and I did one recently to a group of women. It was just talking about fat loss through menopause. And I asked them, I said, you know, as far as exercising, can I ask how many of you lift heavy weights? How many? And by heavy weights, I mean something that stresses the body, you know, that causes overload in the body and muscle adaptation. And 4 people out of the 15 that were there did. So I thought that was quite a high number, like a third of the people I thought was pretty good, considering the fact I was talking to probably the top 20% of the population. These were women that exercised or that ate well or had an awareness about how important that was. And so I said to them, but would you pick your child up? when they were 5 years old still. If your child fell down, would you pick your child up? And they said, well, yeah. And I'm saying, so your kid's probably in the 40 to 60 pound weight range. So that's considered, for me, that's considered load, and that's considered resistance training. So why, if you're capable of doing that, would you not think you're capable of picking up a 50-pound kettlebell and squatting with it? Because you're more than capable. And I think it's just a mindset, because we've been encouraged all our lives. Well, I have to say I was never encouraged to be small, but there is a voice around women, especially, like you say, 15 years ago, where we was encouraged to be small in lots of ways, in our voice, in our bodies. And I think the tide has turned, and it's so great to see women being vocal, to being bigger in their presence and being empowered to lift heavy weights and to be strong, because the byproduct of, as we know, of lifting heavy is the sense of empowerment and unfuckability, I call it, because you just feel as though you can take the world on. And so I agree. I think that we're evolving as women, and we're not fragile. But we can have woe is me moments too, though.
Well, and so can everybody. I mean, I have woe is me moments. Yeah. I had one this morning.
So, do you have a menopause moment?
Well, yeah, you mentioned fat loss during menopause, and that sentence would raise a lot of eyebrows for a lot of people, because menopause is supposed to be, culturally we've decided it looks a certain way, and it's supposed to be the time where you sit down and you take up knitting and you gain 40 pounds. How does fat loss during menopause happen when you're battling all of these hormonal problems and you're so depressed that you haven't even opened the shutters, let alone left the house in 4 days?
I have to be honest, I sit and knit all the time, but I've done that since I was 20, so.
Fair enough.
And I did this talk, fat loss through menopause. I've written for you guys on it too, and I've spoken to experts. I am a nutrition coach, but I'm not a registered dietitian, and so I acknowledge the fact that I've got a scope of practice. So I reach out to people like Georgie Fear, who has been a great mentor to me, and just to find out from a biochemical level, why women tend to put weight on during menopause, and what they can do about it. And it's pretty interesting because there is the perceived image of that menopausal woman having grey curly hair, knitting, with a shawl on, with a rocking chair and her hot chocolate, and that sounds actually wonderful. But anyway, I look in the mirror and think, I'm too young for this to be happening. Like, I don't believe I look like I should be somebody going through this. And I think a lot of women feel that. And I also think probably because 40 and 50 now look different to how 40 and 50 looked in the 60s or maybe in the 20s, when, we're just I feel like we're a younger generation. But as far as weight gain happening, it happens to men too. We know that muscle mass starts to degenerate from the age of 30 onwards, and we know that it's harder to lose weight, right? That's just a fact of life. And so the strategies for losing weight through menopause haven't really changed at all. Like, you need to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. We know that. But we also know that as we age, we're fighting a harder battle than we fought in our 20s. And so, the things we used to do in our 20s, like these hardcore diets, like we're just going to just eat grapefruits for a week or live on shakes for a week, or, they don't work like they did, because our bodies are just inherently different. So as well as fighting, those signs of age in that natural aging process of losing lean muscle mass, we do have the hormonal factor to take into account. Now, what that means is that they don't have any definitive reason to know why women gain weight during menopause, but we do know that our stress levels are impacted. So we've got a cortisol issue that we're fighting. We do know that the body still needs to produce estrogen hormones that don't get produced from the ovaries anymore. And so you need a healthy level of fat in the body for the body to be able to produce estrogen because it comes from some fat cells. But it doesn't mean to say we need to get fat, if that makes sense. And so we just need to just look at the whole thing from, like a holistic point of view, and it goes back to everything we spoke to earlier. One, we need to be doing resistance training to build up more lean muscle mass. We know that that is metabolically active, meaning it uses its calories more efficiently. So we need to build lean muscle mass. And so for women, we have to start lifting. We just have to. And that's for health reasons too, obesity, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis. There's so many benefits. We need to start managing our stress levels so that we keep our cortisol levels down, because we know that that can help, add to fat gain. During menopause, we tend to have issues with insomnia, sleep disruption. We know that that impacts fat gain. We also know that as well as this, we are sort of like fighting that emotional component of menopause that I spoke about earlier, where we really maybe don't feel like we want to exercise like we did, or we don't have that zest for life. So there's also a mindset type coaching, a cognitive behavioral type aspect. We need to look at things where we need to reframe our days and say, it's okay if today is not a good day for you. So just have a level of acceptance, and maybe tomorrow you can do more. And so I think one of the things we need to do is take the pressure off ourselves, and then just take that step back and just look at things from not just, oh God, I've got to stop eating the chocolate, I've got to stop drinking, and I've got to stop eating the cake, but just look at things from that holistic point of view. So that's the way I think fat loss should be looked at. I don't believe that any of these quick fixes are really advisable during menopause, because the body is already stressed, and then you stress it, do one of these crazy diets, the chances are you're going to end up putting more weight back on.
Well, and the yo-yo effect is well documented in all of nutritional research. If you slam yourself down with a 6 or 8 week or 12-week plan and you lose 20 or 30 pounds, you're gonna gain that back. And that plays with body weight set point theory and all these other things that are loose constructs of how it actually works, but they're useful models to understand. Yeah, don't crash the truck, man.
Don't crash the truck, and I don't have any links and resources now, but they're in many of the articles that you've posted of mine, and they are readily available. If you go through Google Scholar, there's lots of information on fat loss through menopause and women in this age range, and so it's such a multifaceted area that you can't just look at one area and think that that's going to fix things. You've got to. It's like be your own scientist.
Mm-hmm. Well, and don't get lost in the complexity of it. There's a risk of sort of surveying the field of your problems, and this is true for anybody, not just women entering menopause. There's a temptation always to look at all of the forces arrayed against you and then just give up. It's the game is the same. If you're trying to improve your body composition, the game is the same. The rules are more or less the same. It's just harder, and you can get away with less. And that's as you were saying, that's true for anybody as they get older.
Yeah, and so obviously the way I would tackle things being a PN coach is that just do small things. Just like if you're a woman who doesn't exercise, then that's the thing I would start with first. If you want to lose fat, just start moving. And that moving could be walking every day. Go for a 20-minute walk. Just see how it makes you feel. Because there's that whole domino effect happens when you start getting some endorphins raised, and there's numerous studies on how beneficial walking is for the body. It's not resistance training, but it's a starting point. And I've got this great belief in women that they just need to just start taking care of themselves, and they'll reap the benefits, and then there'll be no stopping them.
Well, and that dovetails nicely into my next kind of line of questioning. What about, have you had clients come to you who are entering menopause and who haven't ever really been fit before? This is kind of a natural life progression, especially in Western society. Like, you grow up, you go to school, you get married, you have kids, you spend the next 20-ish years raising those kids, and you run smack into menopause at the end of it, and meanwhile, you've been busy raising kids for the past 20 years, so you haven't done a darn thing. So maybe they don't have an athletic background to fall back on or even any experience in that area. How do you kind of address that problem?
Yeah, and that's pretty common. And so again, I would just take a look at everything in their lives and just see the area that they think they need most work on and just choose that area. So chances are the amount of self-care that woman has given herself over those past 20 years has been at a minimum. I imagine that woman has spent most of her time being the caregiver for everybody else, right? So one of the first things I would do is just say to her, why don't you just take 30 minutes out of the day to do something for yourself and for nobody else? Why don't you just start there? Just start to appreciate yourself and start to give yourself a little bit of self-love. And it can be any type of self-love. I was going to go on a really rude tangent, but I got to tell you, that helps. Anyway.
It's all linked into health, right? I mean,
Feel good endorphins. But
yep.
I'm pretty serious about the fact that most women who have menopausal symptoms that honestly feel overwhelmed with them, chances are their self-esteem is very low. Chances are they feel lost and they feel lonely in their symptoms, and they feel isolated, maybe a little bit invisible. These are genuine symptoms that I know that women go through. And so to try and regain some self-esteem and just some sense of belief in themselves, to me, is important. And we also know that women inherently over the age of 40 lose a sense of their ability to be athletic again. They just believe they can't do it. And I've even experienced that, and I came from an athletic background. It happened to me on a ski hill. I was going down a ski hill and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it. And it came out of nowhere and it made no sense to me. But I know it's like a natural phenomena. So how about you start getting that belief again? And do that just by, like I said, just doing something very simple, taking 30 minutes to yourself and just trying to and think of something you'd like to do that you feel like is within your grasp. Give yourself a win and start there. You don't have to, most people, not just women, most people want to make a change and they do too many things at once but they just can't cope with it. There's a small amount of people out there that really feel good from making quick changes quickly and can run with it. But I think the majority of us find it helpful just to make a small change consistently, stick with that, and then try another change. These small habits, these small skills work.
I think the approach you just described should probably be the subject of its own podcast, because it's so critically important to understand for anybody who's trying to improve their health starting at zero. Take 30 minutes a day, not even to exercise necessarily, but take that 30 minutes a day to do something that's going to give you a positive feedback loop. Because what that does is it creates the foundation of a positive habit that you can build on. It's not that you have to go to the gym and crush yourself for 30 minutes a day. It's that you have to create the expectation in your mind that there is going to be a period of time every single day that you set aside for self-care, whatever that's going to look like. And once that habit's established, if that takes 6 weeks, if it takes a year, but once the habit's established, you can build on it. Maybe you spend that 30 minutes a day, maybe 3 days a week you spend that walking, or 3 days a week you spend that doing a plyo class or anything. You can, but the important thing is to have that foundation, to create that psychological expectation and that reflexive thing. Every day at 10:30 in the morning or whenever it is, these 30 minutes are mine. And once you've got that, man, you can do just about anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be exercise-based. In fact, chances are it'd be better if it wasn't. It was just a moment of reflection and taking stock. And I think that it's a premise around mindfulness. But like you said, that could be a whole other podcast. In fact, there are many podcasts on just that whole aspect itself. And at first, when I heard the term mindfulness, I'd be like, it's some freaking hippies smoking weed and, yin yang. And honestly, it's been a lifesaver for me. And my 30 minutes a day is I grab a cup of coffee, I sit outside with a book and just sit quietly and read. That's what I do every day. It's like pressing reset.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's if you can develop that into an unassailable habit pattern, you're going to be unstoppable because
Yeah.
that centers you and it gives you something to latch onto as a sense of normalcy every day. Even when your whole world is falling apart, your hormones have completely jumped off a cliff and the world is crashing, you know you have that 30 minutes to look forward to as a centering mechanism, like I said, to keep you on a path of forward progress and to keep you feeling like something is going right, something is normal when you have that
Yeah.
going on.
You've got control of something, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever had somebody sent to you who had already given up? Like had, a client of yours sends in their friend and how do you, that's the toughest one, right? Like how do you address that situation?
And do you mean from an exercise perspective?
Any perspective. You're
Any
not really
perspective.
exercise.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I call myself an over 40 women specialist, and I obviously had a full gamut of clients. It wasn't just people that fell into that spectrum, but any women that came to me that honestly felt like they were a little bit lost and they didn't know where to start. I mean, most coaches would sit down with somebody and interview them and do a form and just find out, what physical ailments they may have, where they are emotionally, what their goals are, and how you can help them. And so once you've sat down with a person and then you found out that information, well, that should be your starting point. But, I have a story about one woman that came to me in exactly the same situation as you described. And she was a woman who was approaching her 50s, had exercised in the past and just stopped because of life, and she worked full time. She really struggled to fit this into her lifestyle, and she came to me with a mindset that was like, I have to do something. The first thing I said to her was, well, you're already winning this game then because you're already seeing me. I mean, the minute that you change your mindset to say, I have to do something, and then you book a session with a trainer, well, then you're already on the journey. So for me, she was already winning. And then the second thing I needed to find out from her is, what did she want to gain from her sessions with me? I wasn't going to say to her, well, you need to gain some strength through your glutes and your core. And I knew she needed to do that, but I needed to know from her what she wanted. Mm-hmm. And it was clear to me that she had forgotten how to do it. She just wanted to move again and feel strong. And it took quite a while to do this. But there was one day when we were working out and I wanted her to do a TRX row. And if somebody doesn't know what that is, to describe it briefly, her body was at like a 45-degree angle and she was leaning backwards, holding on to two straps of the TRX. And I asked her to straighten her arms from a bent arm position. And she wouldn't do it. She said, I can't because what you're asking me to do is let go. Like, let go of my strength. Because holding it in the isometric contraction was giving her so much strength. I actually didn't mind her holding it there. But the idea of letting go and falling backwards was just so far removed from it. It was also like a metaphorical issue she was dealing with as well, if that made sense. It was the whole letting go and having trust in herself again. So I stood behind her and held onto her back, and I didn't physically hold her, but I gave her a tactile feedback, and she slowly let go. And she went back down in a plank position. Her body was rigid, and she went down so her arms were straight. She then pulled herself back up and she danced a jig of joy, because she was like, oh my God, did you just see what I did? I could do it. And people might be listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, that's so lame. All she did was a TRX row. No, it wasn't lame. It was huge, because she just suddenly found belief in herself, and she found in her a sense of strength, not just physically, but that empowerment that she was able to do anything at all. And so now, after working with, I don't work with her in person anymore because I've relocated, but she ended up being an endurance athlete doing like 200-kilometer bike races, because she had a belief that she could do that. So a year on from that moment, she's just flying, literally flying, because she found that belief in herself. So going back to the question, I think if you're a coach and you've got a woman that's come into you and she just hasn't got any background at all, you know, she nutritionally isn't sound, she hasn't worked out for a long time, she doesn't know what she wants in her goals, she probably just wants to feel good again. Just find something that you can give her a small win and just keep giving her those wins, because every time you encourage that client, she's going to feel better about herself and she's going to take that and run. You know, she's going to just grow and grow and grow.
This is such a unique approach as a coach to what maybe a lot of people are used to, both coaches and athletes alike, because most of the time when you go to work with a coach or a trainer, there's not a lot of that sort of softer mental side that's overtly addressed. And it probably should be more than it is, but when you're working with an over 40 woman client, or if you are one yourself, you got to lead. It sounds to me like you have to lead with that. You have to lead with that softer side to get the psychological buy-in before any of the physical stuff is even going to happen. Because if you don't create that sort of rapport, nothing. They're not going to show up. You know, they're not going to come back.
Yeah, and it also happened with my male clients as well. Now, let me just clarify. These women and men actually worked really, really hard, whether they even noticed it or not. You know, they came to me and they had a strength session and they would feel it the next day. You know, they really did work. But as far as creating a safe, trusting environment for them to enter, I want them to leave that session with me feeling better than when they came in. I want them to feel like they've had value for money. I want them to feel like they've made a good investment in their health, and I want to start empowering them. And so that's not just a case of saying, okay, I'm going to teach you how to deadlift today. It's more than that, right? It's a bigger approach to it, and I think it actually shows the difference between being being just a trainer and being a coach. And I think that most progressive trainers now are actually coaches, and they are doing this. So the coaches are out there for sure. And if you're a client listening to this, just keep looking till you find that person. And like I said, like I work these people hard all the time. They probably just didn't even realize it, you know, because they were just having an experience. And I think that's what you need to give your clients when they come to you, is an experience.
Yeah, I had a debate with another trainer once that we were talking about programming and how important is the program to your gym or to your facility. And my point of view was your program matters, but it kind of doesn't, because people aren't coming to you for a program. People aren't coming to you for a workout. They're coming to you for a solution. They have a problem, and they're coming to you to help them solve it. So while the program matters, it matters a lot less than getting the buy-in so that you get the consistency, so that you get the program adherence. The program, we spend a lot of time, on Breaking Muscle even, we spend a lot of time talking about programming tips and proper structuring and periodization. And, you know, we're doing a thing right now where it's hashtag strong season, right? Take time off from what you've been doing and focus on something else to develop your physiology in a different way. But none of that matters. None of that matters if you aren't giving them the experience, as you say, creating that positive, safe environment that's going to keep them coming back, that they're going to walk out of the gym feeling better than they did when they walked in. If you aren't creating that, I don't care how good your program is.
And it's interesting because when I train small groups, there's definitely a program aspect there, because it's just for control. And just to make sure that, you know, all of the essential movements are covered, and, you know, all of the hip dominant, knee dominant moves, and push pull, you know, we can go on and on about programming, but that programming in a small group is really helpful, just so you've got management and you're able to still coach people. But when it came to one-on-one, I actually stopped programming. I made the conscious decision to stop. And what happened is, as I was writing programs for my clients, it's time consuming, but for me, it was an investment in the client, so I didn't mind spending the time. But what would happen is I would work with that client, and I realized, like, for example, that day when she walked in, that program wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen. And especially when you're dealing with menopausal women, some days they basically just can't. And I mean can't do the day. So if they turn up for your session and they can't do anything too strenuous that day because their body's already overstressed, that whole session of hinging and explosive movements and overhead pressing that you had programmed might not be appropriate for that particular client that day. So you have to be able to be adaptable. Those elements are super important to my client. Like, I want her to do explosive movements. I want her to do a great hinge. I want her to do some reactive core work. But it really does require you to be able to coach that in an appropriate way. And I've had many sessions where I've just worked on mobility. I've worked on keeping on the floor because they couldn't go up and down too much because they had vertigo or something. Or you might have a client that comes in and says, I can't do this today, I just don't feel like it. But then 50 minutes into the session, she can. So you need to jump back into something. And so to me, have a session in mind that you want to do with a client, but be open for interpretation, right? If you're a good coach, you should be able to coach on your feet. And so as far as programming went, I basically would have my program and end up putting it aside. I knew enough as a trainer what I needed my client to work on, and so it became a moot point. And then actually those training protocols, those programs I wrote, I would often give to the clients to do at home if they wanted to. So it ended up being an added bonus for them, but they didn't do it. They just waited till they saw me. So, so I think, for me personally, I write programs for myself, but I don't do them if I can't that day. So.
Well, the most successful years I've had as an athlete have been the years that I was the most adaptable with my programming. Like last year I had a really, really good season running, largely because I was in a place where I couldn't do much else. So I got a lot more volume in than I normally do. But I wrote very, very detailed programs for myself. I want my 400 splits to be this, and I want my 5-mile tempo to be that pace, and all these things. And there's a saying in war planning that the plan never survives the first point of contact with the enemy. So you write your plan, you create your battle plan, and then the gunfight starts, and all the plan's gone already, like as soon as the first bullet's fired. So yeah, it's fine, and you adapt, and you have the overall intent. You want to meet the intent of the program. You got, if you're going to run a half marathon, you got to get the base miles in at some point. You can't leave them for forever. But they don't, if Saturday morning is your run time and you wake up and you're a disaster because of whatever, because your biology isn't helping you out, or because maybe you went a little too extra hard the day before on the weights or whatever, you got to adapt. And you should do that as an athlete. You definitely better be able to do that as a coach, or you're not much of a coach. Because the alternative to forcing yourself to do those things, and look, sometimes you do got to suck it up. Sometimes you just have to, smack yourself in the face a few times and pour the coffee down your throat and go get the work done. But know when to push and know when to back off and say, look, today's not the day. And if you push into that too often, it's when you end up injured. It's when you end up demotivated. It's when you end up falling off the wagon altogether because you just dug yourself too deep of a hole physically or psychologically to stay on it.
I have to say, you've just took the words out of my mouth, because the follow-up I was going to say is exactly that. Your body can cope with being pushed above its limit. It definitely can, because we know that's where the magic happens. But if you go too hard and your body's already stressed, then you've said you could get injured, you may not recover as well. If you don't have adequate recovery, then you're going to be stressing your body more than it needs. You have to find that the point in your own workouts that works for you. And that's what you need to do as a coach. You need to look at each client individually. They're all unique, just like you. And so I feel as though every time I have a client, I know their magic point. I know where I need to push them to, and I know how much I need them to recover as well. And we were speaking off camera, off mic, about my half marathon. I trained for 13 weeks. I had a program that I wrote for myself, and it was exactly that. I had tempo runs, I had sprint runs, hill runs, my long runs, and it was great. And I was running, and I had a half marathon scheduled for my birthday. And it was my birthday present to myself because I haven't done a half marathon since I was 18. I used to do quite a few, and I wanted to do it myself. And then the Thursday before, I had a migraine that had me in bed for 3 days, and I was so sick, and I was like physically sick as well. And my husband basically begged me not to do it, and I had to take a step back and think, how much do I really want to do this? Well, I did really want to do it, but I know that the impact that doing it would have had on my body for weeks to come, and so I chose not to do it. And it was really hard for me to do that. I was upset, I was crying, I was frustrated, but it was the right decision. And so you're right in what you're saying. You really have to have an awareness about your body and know when to stop and when to start.
And give yourself the grace to be wrong. You're gonna get it wrong. I've gotten it wrong. I have the hospital bills to prove that I've gotten it wrong. You know, the thing is to keep trying and keep pushing, because if you're not, you're dying. Like, if you're not pushing yourself up against it and finding out where those limits are, and taking a chance on making mistakes and overextending yourself, and, you know, putting yourself in the hospital because you tried to do too many deadlifts with a very poor cervical spine position, which is a story I can tell another time. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Make mistakes. Ding up your shoulder. It'll be fine. You'll heal. The human body is amazingly resilient. So don't be scared to just go fast and take chances, as we say in the mountain bike community. So one of the things that you touched on there, and I want to kind of go back to, is programming on your feet or coaching on your feet. You have a unique perspective because you've been involved in all these things like we talked about before. What are all the different tools that you use in a training environment?
Yeah, so I have my go-tos. We all have our go-tos. So these aren't, I'm not telling everybody they should use these, but these are the ones that I use. So my foundation in exercise comes from the DVRT system. So that's a system I like to use. And the DVRT system is what we use with the ultimate sandbag. Mm-hmm. The ultimate sandbag is the tool. The DVRT system is how we use the tool, but it can be used in any environment in exercise. It stands for dynamic variable resistance training. And so basically, if I was to do anything with a client, I always do multi-joint, multi-planar exercises that do use the essential movements, and those are going to be hip dominant, knee dominant, push, pull, vertical and horizontal, explosive movements, and core resistance. Okay, so that's how I would approach an exercise session. But what I actually use as implements are the obviously ultimate sandbag. The reason I like that is because the sand makes it a variable implement. You just don't know what to expect when you're using it. So your body has to work with the bag, and it just produces results that I haven't been able to replicate with another implement. My clients also liked using them because it makes you feel pretty powerful. It's one of those great tools. I love the TRX. It works really well within the system that I explained previously. I love using kettlebells. They're not for everyone, like you said, and that's often because they just sometimes feel a bit awkward, but I think persistence with kettlebells is worth it, because I think that the ballistic nature of them and the athletic nature and the ability to be able to do explosive movements, I think is great. And then I like the more traditional barbell. I love using a hex bar for my deadlifts. I just like the way it positions my shoulder, my body. And I love bodyweight exercises too. I'm a great fan of animal flow, of mobility exercises. I did yoga for 25 years. So, anything that can be used applicably for functional strength, and by functional strength I mean everything I've just spoke about in the system. So that's how I would approach things. If you were to look at my gym, it would have a squat rack, a bench, so it would look traditionally like another gym. It would have all my sandbags, some valve slides, some medicine balls, and it would have my TRX and some resistance bands.
Just a handful of basics, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. One of the things I've kind of recently, and this is weird, I always go about things backwards, But I've only recently bought a set of kettlebells for the house because all this time I've been going to the gym to work out or going out on my bike or running from the house, but I've never had any resistance training at the house before. And I'm terrible at body weight stuff. I'm just awful. I'm long-limbed and I'm heavy and it's just awkward and bad shoulders, whole nine yards. But I've got these kettlebells at the house, and as a coach and a programmer, I can create anything with those things. I've got 4 kettlebells, and I didn't even buy the heaviest one I wanted to buy because it was really expensive. So
really
I've got 4 kettlebells, and for an iron ball with a handle on it, come on, guys, you're ripping me off. But whatever, it's popular, so they're going to be expensive. But dude, there's not a limit to the number of different things that I can do now in the house. I've got a TRX rig, and I've got kettlebells, and I've got a yoga mat in the tiniest bedroom in my house, and I can destroy myself in there in 15 minutes, like completely top to bottom, do the whole job.
Yeah, and I think that there's a couple of points there that really work. I would train clients in their home in a small space, and it doesn't have to be for a long time either. I
Right.
think, like you say, 15, 20 minutes. Chances are that's more than most people do.
Mm-hmm.
The way I like to look at it, I say there's like 168 hours in a week. Can you give me like 2 hours? Can you give me 2.5 hours a week?
Right.
Doesn't
Yeah.
seem that much in the scheme of things. You can, I mean, and that's all about a mindset about prioritizing what's important to you,
Right.
and making that happen.
One of the things I wrote in an article recently is that when people say they don't have time, it's code for it's not very high on my priority list.
Yeah.
Because 168 hours a week is a lot of hours. And even let's say for the sake of argument that you sleep for 50 or 60 of those hours and you work for another 50 or 60 of those hours, that's still a big chunk of time left. You still got another 32 hours of your life. And I'm only asking for 2,
Can I just tell you how great your math was then? Because I'm like adding it up on my fingers.
It's probably wrong anyway. Somebody will probably write us a nasty gram after they hear the episode. You did the math wrong. There's actually 100 and whatever hours in a week.
It's also sometimes the case of even if they had the time, what do they do?
Yeah, and that's where the paralysis by analysis comes in.
Yeah.
Here are all my problems. Here are all of the solutions to my possible problems, and then you sit there and you don't do any of them. Instead of go take the dog for a walk. That's 100% better. One of the things Tom Kelso did very well, he wrote an article for us a while back that was one set of one exercise is 100% better than nothing. Do one set of 20 back squats. Don't even warm up. Don't cool down. Go there, pick up a bar, put it on your back, do 20 reps, walk out. You already are 100% better than you were going to be sitting at home stewing about how you couldn't get the best workout in. And that's something that, I have to remind myself about that all the time because I'm very perfectionistic. I want to have that perfect workout. I want to hit all my reps. I want to have time to warm up and cool down and do meditation. And all of a sudden I'm in the gym for 4 hours. And there just isn't time for that every day. So it's always challenging. And that's one of the things, having the kettlebell set up at home has helped with is get some workout. It doesn't have to be the workout.
And one of the things I always say to my clients as well is like find what works for you. For some people, the physical act of leaving the house and going to like a small group training class or going to the gym is the thing that will make them move. The small act of saying, I'm only going to buy my coffee at the Starbucks, which is 2 miles away, and I'm going to walk the dog and back again, might be the thing that motivates them. For some, like you and I, that having equipment at home is motivating enough for me. I know if every single day, apart from today at 9 o'clock, because that's when we're doing this, every single day at 9 o'clock is my time. I just walk to the gym, and I have a little gym set up, and I do my workout, and it's done. And I have to do it at that time. That's my time. So find your time, and just find what works for you.
Yeah, and we had Jocko Willink on the podcast last week, and he was a fantastic interview, but his time is 4:30 in the morning. Former Navy SEAL, that's how he's wired. Man, that I don't identify with that because 4:30 in the morning is the middle of the night for me. But his point was there's no excuses then. Like nobody else is awake. Nobody else is going to bother you. Your phone's not going to ring. There's no traffic. Everything is perfect for your workout. If you can do it, if you can hack the wake up, then 4:30 in the morning, man, it's hard to argue with the man's logic. It's hard to argue with him anyway because he's a Navy SEAL and he's kind of looks like.
And you're in awe. And you're in awe of this man. Okay, whatever you say, I agree.
Yeah. No, but I mean it's a solid point. Whatever that time is, if 9 a.m. is your time, I used to coach a noon class at a CrossFit gym, and that was their time because the kids were at school. It was the middle of their day. They could go get it in and get it done, and nothing was going to disturb them from that time. There's a 10:30 class at the gym that I go to now that's very much the same. That's it. So whatever that is, whatever your day looks like, whatever your job is, if you work second shift, maybe your time is midnight, maybe it's 2 in the afternoon. I've been all of those places. I've worked every shift and every job. You just have to adapt to it and find wherever it is that you're going to get it done. What is normal? This is a big question. It might take us a while. What does aging normally look like, especially for women?
Oh my goodness, that's like a hard question to answer, right? And I suppose the answer really is it depends, and it's individual to yourself. I might just say, by the way, talking about natural aging, that not all women will have menopausal symptoms, or there's going to be a spectrum, because I particularly have them bad, and I know some people that get through them and don't have any symptoms, right? So normal for you is normal for you and not for somebody else. But I mean, what's going to happen as you age is that you're going to lose muscle mass. So that's a natural sign of aging, and if you don't do anything about that, then you're going to get fat, right? Chances are, depending on your body type as well, again, it's all dependent, but you're more likely to put weight on as you get older than you do when you're younger, unless you try and do something to counter that. Exercise.
Well, and not just fat, but incapable. Let's not forget, the point of muscle is not just to burn fat, although it does a fine job at that. The point of muscle is to move your body through space. So if sarcopenia is the word that they use to describe muscle falling off your body as you age, dude, if you are not fighting that battle, you're going to be in the nursing home. Like next week, it's going to happen fast.
I mean, it's our support system, right? It's going to stabilize your joints, and so it's integral to having a health. I want to be able to fasten my own shoelaces when I'm 90. I'm not going to die till 102 anyway, but I want to be able to do that myself, right? So the natural sign of aging, I mean, for me, is you need to be keeping your mind sharp, keep learning, right? That's a huge thing for me. Keep active in whatever community you're in. Keep moving. Make good choices in your life. And I don't just mean like when it comes to exercise and food, although for me they're really important. Make good choices in your community, in your friendships, in your goals. Make good choices in the places you pick to go on holiday, anything, right? So and also start embracing what you're going through, because we've got media. Oh God, don't get me started on media, but you've got the media sort of not honoring aging, right?
Yeah.
We're not honored. Like, we're considered to be past it, has-beens, unimportant, and yet the chances are people like us, like me, I should say, who are approaching 50, have got like a wealth of knowledge behind us that you can tap into. We've got experience, and people should learn from that, whether it's learn not to do it or learn from them, right? So I think honoring people as they age is huge, and just go into it with grace and with resilience.
Well, and what kind of life do you want to have?
Yeah.
There's a tendency in Western society to retire and sit down and waste away until you die. That's no life. You're approaching 50, you could only be halfway. I mean, legitimately, by life expectancy in Western society, you could be looking down the barrel of another 5 decades of your life. So what do you want that life to look like?
Exactly.
This is not a downhill slide. You're only halfway in.
And part of the thing I would say as well is, that there's this a huge proportion of the North American population that don't exercise at all and don't look after themselves. And I would say to those people, if you're not happy, it's never too late to make a change, a small change. And the small changes are the ones that work. So if you feel like you're at the point where it's never going to get any better, you need to take a step back and think to yourself, actually, it can. And the first place you need to start is telling yourself that you can make changes. So it's never too late. Don't give up just because you feel like it's just too hard. You definitely can do it.
Well, and how much better does it have to be for you to try?
Yeah,
5%
right.
better, 10% better, 50% better? I mean, if the thing is, if you, anybody, and I mean, this applies to anybody at any age, if you start now, a year from now, you're going to be X% better. If you just start the work, take that first step, book your first appointment with a personal trainer, whatever that's going to look like for you. You set aside those 30 minutes of self-care every day. What are you going to look like if you apply yourself to that and do it consistently for a year? In a
Exactly.
year, you can be regretting that you never tried, or in a year, you can be that much better. So what are the alternatives? And the other thing I wanted to touch on is Jordan Peterson is a Canadian professor of psychology and a brilliant man. And one of the things that he started is what's called a future authoring program, and he has his students write down what their successful life would look like in 10, 15 years. And this is a pretty common thing. And then write down the steps that it's going to take to get there. And then, this is the crucial part, write down what will happen if they don't take those steps. So you get the positive and the negative. You get the dark side and the light side, as it were. And if you are a middle-aged or later person, male or female, you already know what it looks like if you don't do the things to take care of yourself. Go to any nursing home in the country. If that's where you want to go, then by all means, man, that's an easy road to go down because all you got to do is nothing. If you don't want to be there, if you want to still be able to tie your shoes when you're 102, start now. Pick something. Start taking the positive steps to make sure that that isn't you.
Yeah, I completely agree, and actually taking this back to like menopausal women, because I know that that's something we were touching on in the beginning. If a menopausal woman or a woman over 40 comes to you, chances are she's going to come to you with many, many, many issues. I did an in-service talk with a gym the other day to a group of 5 20-year-old male trainers. And their main clientele are women over 40 who are going through menopause. It tends to be the case, right? Most people in the gym are going to be men and women between 35 and 55. I mean, it's just a bulk of people that go to the gym, and they desperately wanted to know how to coach these women from a mindset perspective, from a physical perspective. So, if you're a coach and you're at the point where you really don't know how to cope with somebody who comes to you who wants to make changes, just get to know the person and find out, like we said, what their goals are. Like you said, find out what their challenges are and start small and just give them the encouragement and the tools to be able for them to be successful. Even if it takes years and years and years, it's going to make an impact on them on so many levels, more than just in their exercise world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great note to finish on as well. If you're a coach, reach the person. Reach the person first, create an athlete later, after you've made that connection with the person. If you are the person, find that baseline habit formation pattern that you can create, that you can build on to create a healthier, happier life for yourself, and never give up, even if you want to.
Yeah, don't give up.
This has been absolutely so much fun, way too much fun. I could spend the rest of my day talking to you. Where can people find you online besides at Breaking Muscle?
The easiest place to find me is to go onto my website, fitandchips.com, and that's FITNCHIPS, fitandchips.com, and all of my links to everything is on there. It's the easiest place.
Outstanding. And you're all over the Facebooks and the interwebs and the social medias, and a fun feed to follow, even if you're not a client. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely have to do it again. There's so much more ground that we could cover here. Have yourself an awesome day.
Thanks, P. Thanks for having me.